At the end of the day, it makes no sense to me because my last name is actually in front of yours alphabetically. So why I'm below you on the screen, it makes no sense.
I think you know why.
I don't think that I know why. I'm going along the list of the things we are good at, and I can find one that you're better at than me, and it's pretending you're better than me at stuff.
No, that is actually probably true. Believe me, I'm going to milk the fact that my picture's higher than you forever, and I will rub it into you as much as I can. Let's start the show, which, by the way, I guess that is the start of the show. Welcome to the Trader's Edge podcast. I'm Jim Urio. As always, the brains behind our operation and co-host Bob Iacchino. And one thing I was going to say is that you can be of the opinion that Jim and Bobby are dumbasses. My wife shares half of that opinion, and she'll be glad to talk about it as much as you want. But at this point in time, you can't argue the fact that we get the best guests. Last week, we had Jim Bianco on. This week, we have Jim O'Shaughnessy on. Bobby, I don't know what it is. We've been in the business a long time. I guess we haven't pissed too many people off, is it, right?
I'm not speaking to you right now. Let's do the show.
Oh, this is going to be the best show ever. It's just going to be me and Jim O'Shaughnessy, and that dumbass Bobby is going to keep quiet. So let's intro Jim O'Shaughnessy, who is the chairman, creator, CEO of O'Shaughnessy Ventures, also the author of What Works on Wall Street in its 4th edition right now. If I went over his entire resume, we wouldn't have any time for the show. So let's bring in Jim O'Shaughnessy. See, it really pisses him off so much that my picture's above his, Jim.
You're looking good too, Jim. I think you really pulled a fast one there. I think, Bobby, you ought to, did you already sign an arbitration agreement with Jim? You can't bring it to court?
He's got a restraining order against me, so I can only do so much.
He can't go within 30 feet of me, actually.
It's preemptive, though. It's like before we ever started doing any show, I'm like, I'm going to come over there. He's like, I did the restraining order 7 years ago.
Yeah, so, he's smart about it that way.
Yeah, he's good.
No doubt
keep
about
everyone 100 feet away from you, and if you could ever get him to figure out the on and off button and the technology, he'd be golden.
I try to turn on my computer, go. Yeah, it just doesn't work. I need a kid
computer
from
Back to the Future. Computer.
Yes. We're gonna have fun. We're not gonna get shit done here, but we're gonna have a lot of fun. So before we do anything, can you tell people how to find you if they want to hear your voice more? I know on Twitter. And tell us a little bit about O'Shaughnessy Ventures, if you would.
Okay. So I'm usually much better versed in telling people how to avoid hearing my voice and or seeing me in any way. Speaking of restraining orders, my wife just extended hers to 200 feet. So
okay,
that gets awkward. If we're going to the same dinner, it gets really awkward because, they can listen to my podcast, which is Infinite Loops, which covers a broad variety from investing all the way to AI and, ideas. That's available on all podcast platforms, also on YouTube. I'm on Twitter. I will be one of the last to shut the lights out there, despite whatever the next owner, if there is a next owner, does to the site. I think that Twitter is a great example of anti-fragility because, my God, they have tried to kill that thing so often. And what I love is I am leaving Twitter, and of course they never leave. They never leave. I would love. I might even put a bounty out there. I will pay $100,000 to the well-known person who goes on Twitter or X or whatever the fuck Elon's calling it today, and says that is it. Virtue signaling. I am never coming back here. And if they're not back for 6 months or a year, I'll give them $100,000.
I'll pitch in some to that as well. It's amazing how people say they were going to move when Donald Trump was elected president. People, just get over yourself. And the irony of them coming on Twitter to tell us they're going to leave Twitter, which is seriously pretty much their self-admission, and it's the only place that you can connect to the people you want to connect to, it's mind-boggling to me. Where are you located? Are you in Connecticut? Are you in New York?
I am in Connecticut, in Greenwich, Connecticut. Yes, insert your favorite cliche here. So yes, I'm out in the wonderful suburbs of New York City. Yeah.
I like suburbs. I'm in the suburbs of Chicago. Right now, I'm currently in the Loop, but in an hour, I head back out to the peaceful, serene suburbs, which I like. Bobby's now down in Naples. He
Which
fled
is
the city
also
of
a suburb
Chicago.
of Chicago, oddly enough.
It's interesting. You go all those 4 towns on the Gulf Coast of Florida. I can go into any bar there and meet like 3 people from my neighborhood. Seriously, it is the
Oh
craziest
no, I
thing.
know. It's like the Hamptons, right? Like, why go
Mhm.
to the Hamptons when you're going to see absolutely everyone you see when you're in the city or here in Greenwich?
It's
It's
No
amazing.
like,
doubt.
You walk
oh,
into a
hey.
sports bar. You walk into a sports bar in Naples or Bonita or any of these towns around here, and you will literally inevitably hear somebody walk in and go, "Why don't they have the damn Sox game, man?"
Wicked. They're wicked this year. Wicked.
Yeah. So here's my question is that you wrote a book called What Works on Wall Street. I just was listening to an interview with you and Michael Guy getting prepped for this, and you were talked about how things have shifted. I've been arguing with Larry Kudlow, and I'm not above dropping names ever. I've been arguing with Larry Kudlow for 20 years that the single most important thing about investing in the stock market was the zero interest rate policy, was the fact that the Fed put was there. Has everything changed? Is the Fed put still there? What are your thoughts?
So, as you know, we're quants and we don't do macro generally because we always screw it up. And like, if you look at all the stuff that I've ever written about the market, I think like there are 3 things that had anything to do about the broader market and where it was going. Uh, my batting average there is pretty good. 2 of them were right. One was really, really wrong. But listen, the the Fed controls the markets, and I believe will continue to control them. If you get to set interest rates, you're God as far as the markets are concerned, in my opinion. And you're going to hear, especially after you come off this prolonged experiment, which in my opinion went on way too long. Because we got all this craziness. When capital is priced at 0, people put money in just bizarre, uneconomical,
like a restaurant bar that I bought 10 years ago because I couldn't get any yields anywhere else. We'll talk about that later.
Jim, you would have done that if interest rates were at 15%.
It's
Come on,
so
man.
much
You
fun.
know that.
It is so much fun. Yes.
But so yeah, I think fighting the Fed, like I've been around forever in markets, and that was one of the first things that I read. Don't fight the Fed. Don't fight the Fed. And so, is the Fed put gone? No, I don't think so. Because if interest rates become, as everyone listening to this, of course, knows, that's your hurdle rate. And if you've got a hurdle rate of 0, a bunch of really stupid stuff gets funded because there aren't returns anywhere else. If your hurdle rate is high single digits, it transforms everything. It touches public markets, private markets, all markets in between. So, and since we are the world's reserve currency and we are the world's lender of last resort, that's a pretty sweet position for the Fed to be in.
Jim, first question I wanted to ask you, and it's kind of a 2-parter, and one has nothing to do with the other. First of all, why the hell aren't you retired? Honestly, I mean, you've done everything, you've earned everything. We titled this show purposely that we're interviewing a legend, and that's not necessarily hyperbole. Why aren't you done? I mean, you just started something new.
So, Bobby, first off, how much did my wife pay you to ask that question?
Less than it cost her to file a training order.
Listen, I would be so incredibly bored if I retired. Like, I don't have too many hobbies. Like, I don't golf. I don't do any of those things that like people do when they decide they're going to retire. And I associate retirement with death, rightly or wrongly. And like, I don't want to die right now. And on top of all that, the world right now, I think we are living right now, right at this moment, in one of the most exciting times in history, honestly. with all of the innovations, with everything that is going on. I call it the Great Reshuffle. And these you can see it everywhere you look. All of the old playbooks are collapsing, and people are doing everything they can to try to cling to that old, this was the playbook that worked for decades and decades, and then it just stopped working. And I think it stopped working because of the confluence and the interconnectedness of everything that's coming together, from the internet, which is the greatest variance amplifier in human history, to AI, to tools that allow like just small groups, even solopreneurs, to use the kind of leverage that to me 10 years ago was unthinkable. And so as all of these playbooks are changing and as all of the various models are changing, we want to participate. We want to fund those new companies that we think are going to accelerate human advancement and creativity. We want to participate in writing positive, optimistic stories about our future. Look at the World Fair of 100 years ago, or even 1930. What was the World Fair? Of course, it was held in America, because America was the country that looked to the future. America was the vibrant company building everything. And if you look at like the movies that were made, and I remember this is after like World War I and the Depression and all this stuff, we were still the most optimistic people on the planet. And that changed. And I think that change has killed some really, really important vibes. So if you look across our verticals, we want to make movies that inspire people again. We don't want to beat people over the head with this is the way you're supposed to think. And we're not going to be preachy. We're just going to be like, hey, have you considered this alternative, right? One of the first movies we're going to make is going to be a documentary about like one of the most extraordinary men I've ever met, Dr. David Roney. Here's a guy who was born into poverty in Oakland, California, hiding from child services because he didn't want them to split his brother and he apart. And he manages to get an appointment to Annapolis, where he plays two sports, where after he graduates, they second him as a naval officer to the NSA. Oh, because he was a cryptology savant and could break codes in his head. And now he's a doctor with aspirations for other things. This is like Rudy on steroids, right? And so people need to know about David. And if we only touch 1 or 10 people, they're like, hey, you know what? I can go that way instead of this way. I'm just having fun, basically.
That's actually great. And first thing, I think Rudy was on steroids in reality. But the second thing I want to point out, I want to actually ask you something. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I'm not asking you to actually make a call here. You brought up AI at the beginning of your description of why you're not retired. And we just did an entire podcast on our other show, our recorded podcast, that'll be out Monday morning, I believe. The entire show was on AI with a couple of guys that we were way too dumb to be talking to. They're just out of this world smart. So I want to put up an NVIDIA chart, because NVIDIA is the obvious one that everybody's looked at. You should be able to see it on your screen right now. And we've got NVIDIA earnings today. So obviously NVIDIA is now AI to everybody, right? So from my perspective, and this is a weekly chart, when we first started getting these moves that I'm referring to here, right? My particular type of active investing, I was just not able to participate in it, right? But now we're getting to the points where I can, despite this exaggerated move, and the move may be justified, and obviously the multiples are crazy on this relative to history for normal stocks, right? So where else, and again, not specifically, but where else do you look to when you have something like this? And I'm not stock specific enough in the technology sector to be able to say, okay, NVIDIA ran away. NVIDIA is the axe. So what's the finished product of AI? Where can I be looking? Is there sort of a sector that's going to benefit, in your opinion, from AI immediately, or do these all have to be new startups?
So that's a great question. NVIDIA, as you guys know, the firm O'Shaughnessy Asset Management that we sold to Franklin Templeton was essentially pure quant, pure algorithmic investing. So the irony here is our models couldn't buy NVIDIA. because the process would not allow it because of valuations. If we had done just a pure momentum play, we would have been super long NVIDIA because momentum works really well as well. I think to answer your question specifically, though, that the leading company in AI of 10 years from now maybe has not even been founded yet, or if it is here, it's about a year or a year and a half old. And so one of the other things that we're doing at O'Shaughnessy Ventures is a lot of private market investing, which I've been doing on the side since '07. And now I'm doing much more aggressively because of what I said about why I'm not retired, right? All these exciting things happening. I literally think that AI, if anything, has been undersold in terms of the impact that it will make on all industries, not just one specific one. Because it's kind of like the ultimate leverage that you can use in whatever your endeavor is, right? So if you're a filmmaker, let's say you're Disney or you're Pixar, feed all of your IP into a multimodal generative AI system and ask it to come up with 12 new princes or princesses, and it will. And then you iterate with your creatives. This is a key part where I differ from a lot of other people. The so-called centaur model of AI, which is, as the mythic creature, half human, half beast, right? I think the centaur model of AI is going to win for the next 5 to 10 years, where it's man and machine. And that's where all the cool stuff is going to happen. But Disney, great, or Pixar, great example. Imagine those creatives feeding all of the IP in, the AI spits out 12 different heroes or princes and princesses. You find the 3 that you're like, oh, that resonates with me. And then the creative goes back and forth, and voila, they've got a new franchise.
So, Jim, when I raise my hand, I'm just talking to Bobby. I got the next. The last thing I ever want to do is cut you off. You keep going. That was just to Bobby when I raised my hand up. I want to say a couple things about what you said, and then bring it back to AI. But when you talk, one of the things that I think is so appealing about you is the optimism that you have, and it comes through almost all the time, and it comes through on Twitter as well. And I need that in my life, because over the last, I feel like I've gotten angrier and angrier, and I don't know if I'm being played, if someone is out there pulling the strings to make me angry, or it's just something that wells up inside me. But you mentioned entertainment, and you mentioned the movies, the tone and tenor of the movies that we used to have here compared to what we have. Then you mentioned Disney and Pixar, and we didn't mention Netflix, but all these people who are streaming content seem to be playing into the vibe of anger. Why is that happening? Are they the source, or are they the reaction, in your opinion?
They're the reaction. Anger sells. It just does. And if you look at human history, we are optimized to be fearful. And anger, it can be considered kind of a byproduct of that triad of the part of our human emotions. Why? Because like our ancestors, if you think about it, right? Who are we, all 3 of us and everyone listening and watching this, who are we the descendants of? Well, if there were 3 people standing on that savanna in Africa and they saw a bush moving, right? We're the ones who ran away. We are the ancestors of the 2 that ran away. The really inquisitive guy went over and said, I wonder what that is, got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. So evolution is like, fear seems to work with these creatures, so it optimized for it, right? And so the idea that central to human OS is not, especially heightened attention to novel fears, right? You saw the whole thing with the pandemic. When you can tell people, and by the way, it also happens to be a fantastic instrument if you want to be a, maniacal, great leader of some country. What you do is you terrify the people, and then you tell them, I am the solution to your terror. I am the one who's going to save you. No, they're not. They're going to make things a lot worse. But it plays right into our, the base code of human OS. So I think that they're reacting and they're doing it because it works, and you can counter program. That's the part that I don't think enough people spend time thinking about. Counter programming works too. Again, referencing H.G. Wells, man. If you read any of H.G. Wells' books, they're all amazingly optimistic about what we could achieve, right?
But if I want to be a maniacal dictator, which I'm not saying I do or don't, you could help coach me on that. It sounds like Bobby wanted the next question.
I can.
We'll talk later.
Yeah, you don't want to see my hourly rate though, Jim. You might put you off.
Yeah, that's going to be too much, right?
Yeah, I want to tell you, Jim O, that since you're making movies, remind me one day to tell you about my idea for a completely politically incorrect comedy called Fried Chicken Parmesan, working title. It's basically the mafia joins a street gang to stop a dirty bomb, and it's awful. So we actually have
that should be in development already, Bobby.
it really should be Fried Chicken Parmesan. I'll do the
Come on,
Italian.
man.
I can do the Italian dialogue with Jimmy's help. I can't do the other side. We have a comment, an audience question for you, and it's an AI related one. So I'm just going to read it to you. How do you think this AI revolution is going to affect movies and movie documentary writers? What do you think of the Hollywood strikes?
So I think first, let's put it into context. There's a great website called pessimist.org that people should check out, because what is not forecastable or predictable are the really cool technical innovations that we're going to come up with. What is perfectly forecastable and predictable is the human reaction to them. And this goes back to the Luddites, right? If you go to pessimist.org, what you're going to see is people saying that these phonographic records are the end of music. You know, the symphony, I think Chicago Symphony Orchestra took a full page ad out in the Tribune when records were getting big, saying why they were the devil's handiwork. And this is absolutely true no matter what the innovation is. It goes all the way up from like radio, the tons of newspaper stories showing dead birds. Were they killed by radio waves? And, just on and all the way through the computer and everything. I bet people were bitching about Gutenberg's. Books? Why do you want? No one's going to know how to read. What are you doing? You're crazy. So to answer the question specifically, I think that the writers who embrace the power of AI technology are going to be the walk-away winners in this. Now, let's be very clear. I do not mean people who say, you know what, I'm just going to have the AI write my entire script, and then I'm going to make that. You know what, guys? 80%, and it's going to be a deluge, a tsunami of AI generated stuff. And guess what? 80% of it, the Pareto distribution rules everything around us, right? 80% of it is going to suck. It's going to be awful. Nobody's going to want to watch it. It'll be a blip and it'll disappear. 20% of it is going to be brilliant and incredible. And the result, in my opinion, as always, my normal disclaimer, I'm often wrong, but will be the result of the Centaur partnership between a human creator and the AI. So the writers who embrace it as a tool, because that's all it is. It's a bit like, I'm not going to use a pen. I'm going to use only smoke signals because that's the way God intended us to create with one another. Pens are tools. So is AI. So the writers who embrace it, go back and forth, use it to iterate against their own ideas, they are going to be leveled so far up, they're going to be almost impossible to compete with. People who say it's the devil's handiwork, I'll never do that, a lot of them will go by the wayside.
So, I equated it yesterday on our show with the AI guys. Like when you listen to music, recorded music, we all have been alive when real horns were replaced by synthetic horns on different recordings. And it sounds it sounds different. It sounds too prepackaged to guys like us. Like when you hear Stan Getz play the saxophone, the imperfections are the soul of it. And I kind of equating that to AI too.
Totally.
Like right now, when you put in, write me an article about how gold performs in inflation, stagflation, whatever, and they write you an article, it sounds like a brilliant sixth grader wrote it. You know what I mean? Like who's trying to impress
Right.
the teacher.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that that's part of it too. Do you agree?
I do. I think that the artist leaves a little of themselves in every creation that they create, and it is. I have long kind of thought of myself as, at best, a co-creator with whatever you want to, the muse or the universe or what an actual human, but it's that little kernel of imperfection, right? That many times unlocks a story or a painting or a movie or whatever. I don't think that's going to end, and I think that that's kind of where the magic happens. But what you need to do is you need to get your mind around the fact that we're talking about a tool. And James Cameron has a lot to answer for with the Terminator. Loved it, loved all the Terminators. Great movies for the most part. But like all of these people that you see on social media or in interviews that we're going to have AGI, which is sentient artificial intelligence. We're going to have AGI in next year. Bullshit. No, we aren't.
Right.
AI right now is a very narrow, it's what's called narrow AI, which is extraordinarily powerful, which we should be like over the moon with our excitement about. I mean, after all, it figured out how to fold protein when we humans couldn't do it for 60 years in trying, right? So these tools are incredibly powerful, but that's all they are, is tools. Married to a human creative, married to a great market person. Like this hits everything. The original reason I got interested in, when we still called it machine learning, right, was because I saw that as the next frontier of quant research, right? And so if you can understand it's a tool, it's only going to be as good or as bad as the operator of that tool or the creator using that tool. And if you get over that hump, then we're going to see lots and lots of great stuff. But we got to get over that hump.
So two-part question then. And I like that this is about AI. We literally just did a whole podcast on it that, like I said, will be released on Monday. But Luke Grumman, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Sure.
As well as the two gentlemen, Marty Weiner and was it Weiner or Weiner? I don't remember, Jenny.
I think it's
Doesn't
Weiner.
matter. Marty Weiner and Noah Healy, who are two basically scientists and computer programmers, who told us that essentially, well, let me tell you Luke's comment first. Luke Grumman's comment was, we're approaching a future where plumbers will make more than investment bankers and doctors. And Marty and Noah also said that, Noah specifically said this, that white collar jobs will be the ones that are harmed by AI early, more so than blue collar jobs. So where do you fall on that? And is this anywhere in the near future that people have to start changing their investment strategies for, or no?
So I think that let's talk about ice harvesters. Okay. At the turn of the 20th century, many men, and it was men back then, made really great livings by harvesting ice from frozen rivers or ponds, putting it on their truck that was led by a horse, bringing it to people's house to put it in the ice box. That's, if you're old enough, you called the refrigerator an ice box, right? And then all of a sudden, these pesky electrician guys come along and invent refrigeration. And everyone is like, oh my God, all of the ice harvester jobs are going to be gone. This is a tragedy. What are these poor people going to do? I bring this up because what they're talking about is probably correct for current jobs, right? The part of the job that's going to be automated away is the boring part, the part that nobody wants to do, the part that the senior investment banker loves to torture the newbie young investment banker, making him align fonts at 4:30 in the morning when he hasn't had sleep for 48 hours, right? What we often completely forget is it is impossible to forecast right now what the list of the highest paying jobs of 2034 are going to be. We can guess, we can take stabs at it, but there's a great quote that is, no matter how smart the person, no matter how switched on, no matter how technically proficient, no matter how broad their knowledge base, you cannot ask them to make a list of things that would never occur to them. And one of the things that we fall into this trap over and over and over, it's like The Simpsons with the guy with the clown stepping on the rake, right? We just keep stepping on this rake because we think we know. We think we know these are all the jobs that ever will be in white collar or blue collar, and that's it. Well, no. There's a great quote from The Beginning of Infinity by the physicist David Deutsch, where he says, hey, what were physicists talking about? What were their opinions on the internet or on quantum physics in 1900? Well, they didn't have them because there was no internet and there was no quantum physics and none of it existed. And so you're talking about probably some of the smartest people on the planet, right? Physicists in 1900. And they didn't know anything about either of those because they hadn't been invented yet. And so I will say that from just looking historically, every time we got a new technology, right? I mentioned Gutenberg earlier. Gosh, he put all those Irish scribes out of business. Well, right, okay. But he also made it so that all of the world could learn how to read and advance the human colossus. And so we need to always be mindful that if you're talking about, oh, well, that is going to throw, insert job category in here out of work. Okay, it might, but it's absolutely silent on what is that very clever man or woman who had that job going to be able to do next. And I would posit that what they're going to be able to do next with these tools is going to be so much more fun, enjoyable, and yes, profitable for them than the one that the AI took away from them.
I love that, and I agree with it completely. I think it's brilliant, and for me, like I said, one of the reasons I wish I had more contact with you is I do love your optimism on things. We've identified kind of tangentially some areas that we think are going to be the most disrupted. I'm not going to say destroyed because we're not doing that. This is about how good AI could be. Entertainment is obviously going to be disrupted quite a bit. Transportation, the legal profession. What are we, because Bobby has a story about using AI to write an easement that was done in like 2 seconds and it was a perfectly good legal document. Things like that. What areas am I missing that AI could have the most profound impact in?
Positive or negative, right?
Yeah. Sure. Let me give you 2 positive and 1 negative, okay? Because the other thing that people do is we tribe up so fast, right? And so the tribe, you're either pro AI or you're against AI. You're either pro this or against this. I think that that's foolish and childish. Like, you've got to be, even as optimistic as I am, I fully expect that there will be lots of bad actors using AI to achieve very evil purposes. And it's part of our charge as people who are investing in this, who are taking part in the industry, to come up with countermeasures to that, right? So we'll give you two good ones and then 1 scary one. So the 2 good ones that I think you really need to think about are education, specifically of childhood education, but just education in general. AI tutors are going to revolutionize the educational experience. Why? Because we're all different, right? So if you look at the way the majority of people in the United States learn, most of them are visual learners. So for a visual learner, if you say to them, can you see the big picture? They immediately get what you're talking about. Now, if you say to a visual learner, does that ring a bell with you? Literally, they're like, no, it doesn't. Why, what are you talking about? Well, auditory learners are the next step down or across, and they respond to very different prompts. And then, of course, there's kinesthetic people. Do you feel what I mean by that? AI, that's child's play to an AI. They'll be able to train on their student and present lessons to that student in a manner that even the best human teacher probably lacked the ability to kind of see, oh, they're auditory and they really get screwed up on this, this, and this. The AI will continually learn on its students. So I think in education, we're going to see a true revolution, actually, Jim, in learning. The second is in medical discovery. I think if you look at some of the things that AI has been able to do, it is nothing short of astounding. And like I mentioned folding protein earlier, but do you know that mRNA platform, as controversial as the tribe people like to make it, is going to, first off, it's a platform. They misnamed it, right? It should be called a delivery platform. But right now, like they're looking at ways to deliver not cures, but ways to inoculate against dysentery, against a whole host of diseases and or afflictions that we haven't been able to solve in the past. Clean up drinking water, desalinization of ocean water. All of these things will have a profound impact and improve, in my opinion, the well-being of a huge number and cohort of people in the world's population. So those are two that I am very, very bullish on. Now on the negative side, what's to stop a very evil person from taking Jimmy or Bobby, either? Let's make it me. They're going to kill me. So they get into my house. They take this glass. They get my DNA. They put it in an autonomous killer AI drone, and it only hunts Jim. It doesn't have any collateral damage. It is tireless. It is relentless. It will hover outside of Jim's window, and the minute Jim is in a kill zone, it gets just Jim with maybe even a specific DNA poison that only kills Jim. That's scary as fuck.
Scary shit. Yeah.
And so thank God that we have DARPA. Thank God that we have the DoD working on this stuff right now and developing countermeasures for this. But it's a provocative example of, right now, could they make that right this second? Maybe not right this second, but they'll be able to make it in the next couple of years. And so we have to be ever vigilant on the white hat side of AI. It's like, fire. Without fire, we wouldn't have prefrontal cortexes, which is the executive function of the brain, right? It's what gave us Homo sapiens the ability to plan, conceive of a future, do all of these coordinate, to cooperate on certain things. And the only reason we got this was because we started cooking our food. Okay, now imagine if we had some of the doomsayers of today around back then. That fire is very dangerous. You can burn entire villages to the ground. You can do all of these horrible, destructive things with fire. And you know what? They were right. You can. Instead of banning fire, we created fire alarms, fire departments, firemen and women, fire rules and regulations. And that's going to be the way that we're going to have to ring fence some of these techs in going forward, right? Because even if you're incredibly optimistic, which I am, about the power of these tools, you'd be a fool if you said, be very Panglossian, everything is perfect in the most perfect of all perfect worlds. No, it's not. You've got to anticipate that we're going to have all sorts of problems and then try to work for countermeasures or negating them.
I'm going to ask
That's
you this.
outstanding.
I'm going to ask you this audience question, even though I'm not quite sure where it fits in. We just love our audience that much. But when you're done answering this one, if you decide to answer it, you don't really have to. Then I want to get your recession view, if you have one. What do you think about H.G. Wells' connection to the Fabian Society? Do you think his technological optimism is a precursor to the technocratic philosophy that controls the internet today? Again,
you have a highly educated audience, because
damn straight we do.
The Fabian Society was an advocacy group that advocated utopian socialism.
Right.
And
H.G. Wells was a socialist, right?
Right. But you've got to remember, a socialist back during H.G. Wells' time or a member of the Fabian Society was not the same creature. They weren't even in the same zip code as the socialists of today. For the most part, they saw it as the next rung of human evolution and cooperation and all that kind of stuff. In other words, they themselves were incredibly optimistic about where those various tools and new innovations and everything else could take us as a species, right? Now, we can, with retrospectively and with hindsight bias, we can point out all of the obvious flaws in that. They didn't really understand human nature. They didn't really understand this idea of people want to control other people. And oftentimes the people who want to do that are not very good people. And so to compare them to today's techno optimists, I don't think is a blanketly unfair comparison to make. Because, I talk to a lot of people who are techno optimists, and for the most part, in many of the conversations, I actually agree with some of the things that they're saying. But I don't sense that sort of all in. Nothing could ever go wrong, at least from the ones that I talk to, right? And so I think that listen. Josh Wolf, who runs Lux Capital and is a friend of mine, has this great saying, which is science fiction becomes science faction. And so we really, you want to know what might be coming down the pike, read a lot of science fiction. It's really pretty amazing. And so I definitely believe that these wonderful flights of imagination about what we are possible of creating and doing are great and often point us in the right direction. You have to temper it with a little bit of reality testing, and you definitely have to bring in human nature. When you do that, and you're mindful about all the things that can also go wrong, right? Then that puts you in a more temperate place where you're like, this is awesome, but we got to make sure that we address X, Y, and Z.
So, Jim, in terms of the recession question, what we have, and I'm going to ask you sort of with a specific set of data that I want to throw into the question. Do you have an opinion? A, B, do you care? And do you care about things like credit card delinquency? So credit card delinquency is the recent data. If you haven't seen it, we got above pre-pandemic levels, where recently we just got to pandemic levels, but we're still not at a historically high level of delinquencies. But the rate of change over the last 2 years in the number of delinquencies on the way up is the fastest rate of change, about 118 basis points since like 1995. So does that concern you? Because my stance is always, I still think we're going into a recession. It just got pushed back, but I also don't care because I don't think it's going to be a very bad one, and I want to buy stocks when the recession starts.
So one of the things that I got good at, because I had so many family members reminding me of all my failings, I got very good at realizing what I was really crap at.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I'm really crap at is making forecasts.
Okay.
I have no idea. That's why I decided, okay, well, this isn't necessarily a forecast, but if I look back over American history, since the founding of the New York Stock Exchange under the Buttonwood Tree in 1792 or whatever it was, US stock returns have been positive about 71% of the time and negative 29% of the time. That is an incredible batting average. And so, like, if you look at what the US overcame, like, just look at the 20th century, man. We went from Spanish flu, World War One, into World War II, a Great Depression thrown in, and we bounced back from everything. This country in particular, right? So I'm speaking U.S. centric right now.
Mhm.
And so I think it might be a Buffett line originally, but I think you'll go broke shorting the United States of America and its people. And I see no reason to change my idea about that. I also think that me trying to think that I could successfully forecast a macroeconomic event, I can't do that.
Mhm.
And like and by the way, when I say that, I am not saying other people can't do that.
Mhm.
I'm saying that I can't do that.
Gotcha.
And since I realize that I can't do that, then I follow for public markets at least, I follow a highly testable, empirically derived process, which is algorithmic investing, right? That has been shown to work pretty well directionally over very many market cycles. That's really all it does, right? And it has a known failure rate, but it's got a good batting average. So in terms of recession, all of that, my opinion is going to be much the same as like where I would, if I was grading my ability to make those predictions, I'd give myself like a D. So I don't make them.
I'm going to give, at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that we tend to get the great guests. And I just realized one of the reasons we get the great guests is we absolutely lie our asses off and tell them we're going to have them on for 15 minutes and then keep them on for 50. And I'm not saying this is a weakness of ours. I think it's a strength. But anyway,
I do too.
we're gonna goodbye you now. This has been fantastic. So nice of you to join us. I really appreciate that, Jim. Thank you a ton.
Jim, Bobby, a true pleasure. Really enjoyed
pleasure,
it.
man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. Cheers.
Good. Have a great day. See you.
You too.
Wow, that was a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah,
again,
he's
he did not disappoint. He never does. He's
not
a brilliant
disappoint
man.
the legend title that we gave him.
And I will underscore again that he's not just a brilliant man, but he puts it out there in such a inclusive and genuine and enthusiastic way. And I think there's so few of them out there. But thanks.
Yeah.
But we have about 15 minutes to talk about markets because I want you to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing in Jackson Hole. We got a bunch of shit going on. What are your thoughts on Jackson Hole tomorrow? First off.
Well, I actually think Powell isn't going to say anything. We all remember a year ago with Jackson Hole where Powell kind of put his foot down and said, "I'm not kidding," right? I wasn't kidding. He's kind of screaming like that. Yeah. And from a perspective of what happens this time, what's he going to say when we've still got almost a month till the next Fed meeting, and we've only seen one batch of data that can be looked at as mixed, and now you just got this small and medium-sized business PMI figures from this morning, where the UK, the EU, Germany, their services PMIs all went into contraction territory. Now, full disclosure, It's the small and medium. It's not the main one. But the US one also missed expectations on every one, and manufacturing went deeper into contraction territory. So I don't know that he is going to say much. I think he's really kind of going to back off. I don't think it's an opportunity for him. And that actually, I've changed my mind in the last week about that. What about you?
Well, but I think the markets have changed your mind too. The 10-year's gone from 3.3 in April to 4.3 now. The dollar's rallied 4.5% just since July. The market he doesn't need necessarily to have the same sledgehammer that he did last year when he
Right.
came on and said, guys, I'm not fucking around. I'm really going to keep rates high. And the dollar rallied like 5% in the wake of that speech. It's interesting that you mentioned Europe. Could we look at the euro real quick too? I'm thinking
Yeah,
about trading that.
I'm actually going to put
So-
I'm going to start, if you're okay with it, with a weekly because it's pretty dramatic.
Sure.
So it should
Yeah.
be up now. There it is.
It is. Yeah.
That's a weekly. Let
So
me get rid
that's
of
the
that.
euro.
Yeah. So if
the
we
euro,
go,
I believe, is down 4.3%, where the dollar's up 4.6%. The whole narrative is that they are considering pausing and reevaluating in the wake of some of that bad data, where we are not. We think that Jerome Powell is going to reiterate his sledgehammer stance. I kind of question
Right.
that a little bit. I'm thinking about, where do I buy the euro?
I don't think you do just yet. And let me just point out on this chart why. So the euro's fallen about 3.4%, right? And this particular trend line, this weekly trend line is off of the lows. Okay, so the way that you properly draw trend lines for active investing, okay, I'm not saying for traditional technical analysts, is people talk about needing 3 points to draw a trend line, and I completely disagree. You need 2 points. You need an initiating point, which would be right here, okay, and you need a defining point, which would be right here. And then the market will tell you what the angle of the trend line should be. Now, right now, we've broken the trend line, right? But that only gives us a target of the original defining point that you wrote the trend or drew the trend line with, which is about 106.55. Okay, so in theory, the market's going to go down here somewhere and probably base around here. Will at least stop here. Okay, if it gets here, it's likely going to pause. And when it does, you'll be redrawing this trend line to reflect that. You'll be doing something like this, right? Drawing it around here. And then if that second draw holds, you buy it. Okay, now this is on a weekly basis, so it's a little bit longer. That's more of an options type of play.
Sure.
Okay. On a daily, it looks even weaker to me, but it's holding the 200-day moving average. So that might actually trump everything. No political comment included there. So if you
remember, Trump used to be a word that we would use.
Yeah, it used to be a word we could legally use. So from this perspective, I would look at this and say, okay, the 200 held. I can probably buy a movement back up off of this 200, which is kind of doing this morning, right? Or this afternoon.
Yeah.
But you're going to get up into what I talked about last week, which is this rotation zone. And this area here is what we call the first cross of the rotation zone. There's no action to be taken there. The rest of the time, the 8 EMA, which is here, has just kind of been pushing the price down. Now, we got a pop here, but it failed. We got a pop here and it failed. And we got a little bit of a pop here yesterday and it failed. If we go up and break this 21 and then come back down into it, that is now a short of the euro. So you would be buying it today or tomorrow, looking for somewhere around this level of about 109.59 to 109.60 area.
Cool. Can we
And
go to
you've got
stocks?
resistance, unfortunately, here. So
Yeah. Right, exactly.
yeah, what'd you say? I missed it.
Stocks. You want to go stocks?
Let's go with the S&P. And the reason is I had a little bit of a, Ben Lichtenstein?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so him and I had a conversation this morning, and he said to me, what do you think about stocks completely shrugging off everything that's going on? And my response to him was a very polite way of saying, what are you looking at? Because all I see is this right now. So you and I talked in the past about duration and bear market, bull market, the kind of naming that does you no good in active investing, in my opinion. What we're seeing right now is a downturn in a downtrend, in a medium-term uptrend, in a longer-term downtrend.
Term downtrend, right?
Yes. So who cares, right? So
Yeah.
going back to that same concept, what I talked to you about the euro with the rotation zone is happening in the S&P right now. This is the ES futures. Okay, let's put up the SPY because it'll look the same there or similar. So here's the SPY. Okay, it's going up into the rotation zone, up toward the upper end of it. If this holds and goes back lower, you're going to be looking for 25% lower than this low as a move, and that's where this red line is. So you're looking at about 427.
Hold on, 25% lower than that low.
Yeah.
Not a 25% move in the asset.
No.
What are you talking about?
I should say 25 basis points. So I just take
Okay.
the Fibonacci retracement tool, which I have changed to
Okay,
a
of that big move, right?
yeah. So right here, and I just do this, and I'm looking at from here to here. I don't want this. From here to here, you see it's a 1.25 extension.
Right.
That's the move I'm looking for, which is about 430 and change in the S&P if this holds. Not a massive
Okay, because
move at all.
that's where I and most of you guys who are listening to this know that at that height of this on the daily chart, where you see the top of that chart, the outside day and closing on the beat low, and then as soon as we went below that is when I put in my shorts. My thinking was that we'd get an 8 to 10% move. But again, I'm not going to bank everything on that 8 to 10% move. If we start getting into the 4,300 level, that 4,300 in the S&P futures is similar to 430 in the SPY, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
And
that's when I start to sell puts out that I own. I already have in every big down move because it was a rather big position for me. So in each big down move, I sold out a little. Each, like today, I re-upped and bought a couple puts that I had originally sold. But you like that trade so far still, right?
yeah, I do. And just a quick shout out to Tim McLean, who's a friend of all our shows, really. He said Germany's numbers are also really soft, emphasizing sort of the global weakness we're seeing right now. So right back to you, from that kind of a chart, if I'm telling you I'm looking for basically the market to get back down to here in the SPY, which again is about actually the actual levels right here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's 431.68 in the SPY. What kind of an option strategy? You don't have to give levels, or you don't have to give actual calls or puts that you would use. What kind of a strategy would you be looking for to take care of the possibility that this thing rolls? Because in the outrights, I wouldn't do it until it rolls, but in the option, you might be able to act a little early. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're not wrong at all. So this was a great question, and it still holds the answer. And a lot of people know the strategy that I have on right now. And I think it worked great when the VIX was at, call it 13.5, which it spent from mid-June to mid-July, where I sold a put and then bought 3 puts underneath it. And because my belief is that, and I still have most of that position on. As a matter of fact, what I've actually done now is I've rolled it. We talked about this before. I have the October 20 puts sold, but now I have the November 17 bought, which has still, I believe, like 86 days to expiration. And I sold, like, I believe they were the 440s. So we're right about where I sold them initially, and bought the 410s and 420s. So essentially it was selling 5% out of the market. This was when we were on the top and VIX was almost nothing. Yep. I still think it's a good trade because I think you sell up duration because people are a little bit nervous and VIX has popped a bit. So you sell the nearer term. So then you get the theta working on that more so than you buy the ones underneath. I don't think I've explained that very well. Should I go at it again or no?
Yeah, give it a shot. We got time for you to explain this, and then we should head.
Right, but you know, NVIDIA's coming out in about 2 minutes. So about 80% of our viewers are going to change the channel in 2 minutes.
All right, so then let's stop. You can talk about it again in the next show, but let's talk next week. We have Cameron Dawson from New Edge Wealth. Yeah. She's going to be our guest, and we'll try to keep her for 15 minutes. But if she wants to stay the whole show, I'm not kicking her off.
I will tell you people this. You guys want Cameron to talk for a whole hour and us to shut our yaps. If she's there, she's just, and you can talk any topic to her, by the way, too. You can talk about, you know, the plumbing of the financial system and lending and borrowing, or you can talk about, you know, old Paul Newman movies. That kid, she knows everything. She's a genius like none other. You guys are going to love her.
Yeah, she's an old industrial analyst too. So you can go into the Baltic Freight Index, whatever you want. So bring your questions.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Let's sign out. Thank you guys for joining us.
Cheers, guys.